Hello, everyone. My name is Romain. I'm the co-founder of Cosmo Connected. Very happy to organize this second webinar, the first one in English, and about the Cosmo Safety Tour. So today we have two very amazing guests that I will introduce very briefly. Dries Ibn Mansour from the GM of Bird, and we also have Samer Taleb, the CFO of AXA Next. So thank you, both of you, for being here. Just a little introduction about Cosmo Connected. I'm just going to share you a little video. Why do we do this Cosmo Safety Tour? And why do we do this webinar? Well, it's simple. Our company is a safety provider for all mobilities. Our goal is to improve riders' visibility from motorcyclists, cyclists, and a new mobility user. And we are decided also to make some actions in Paris a bit on the 9th of March this year with all of our partners. And the idea was to make sure we could prevent, to make some action to make sure that the kids and other people could get used to drive new mobility, scooters, city scoots, and also bicycle. And it was quite of a success, and we were very happy to have also Dries who was there and all of the other partners. And we wanted to make that kind of action. Unfortunately, as you are aware, we are now in lockdown, international lockdown, but we have a bit of better visibility. Hopefully, we will be able to take our bike, run, our moto, our cars. And I think it was important to do this webinar to discuss about what global companies such as Bird and AXA was doing the last few weeks, but also to discuss about what's going to happen in the next few weeks and to share a bit the vision of the micromobility and also in the insurance world. So thanks for being here, and let me introduce straight away Dries and Samer. So guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So Dries, thanks for being here. As you're younger, I guess, maybe if you can quickly introduce yourself and the company for our watchers.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Romain. Thanks for hosting this webinar. I really enjoyed the last one last week with Henri and Bertrand. Looking forward to discuss with Samer as well. Quickly about myself. As you pointed out, I'm the GM of Bird for France. I've been working in mobility for quite some time now, for almost 5 years. I started my career in strategy consulting. Then I moved on to Uber in early 2015. So Uber was launching in many countries, and actually my first job with Uber was launching new markets. First in Cairo, Egypt, and then Morocco. So basically, you get sent there. They give you not a lot of things, not a lot of guidance, and you have to set up the entity. You have to acquire the first drivers, the first users, find an office, try to sign deals with limo companies, because that's the model we had when we first started, like having big limo companies on the platform, and launch the service, scale the operations, and move on to another launch. So I've done that first in Cairo, then in Casablanca, Morocco, where I was born. So it was a great opportunity for me to launch the service in my hometown. I really enjoyed it. After about a year, I moved to Singapore to launch to head the new mobility business for the Singapore market. So for instance, I was incubating and launching new projects. For instance, we launched a EV, electric vehicles product in Singapore, which was quite exciting. And then my next job was with Ofo. Ofo was one of the pioneers in micromobility. So it's a Chinese bike sharing company that went international really fast. I was managing the Spanish and Portuguese market for them for 1 year. After which I joined Scoot Networks, which is a electric mobility company. So they were multimodal, doing bikes, scooters, and mopeds, and they were quite successful, which led to the acquisition by Bird in June of last year. At which point I was offered the opportunity to move to Paris and manage the French market.
Wow.
What I've done.
You've been moving a lot lately.
Yeah, I've been moving a lot.
Have you met Henri from Dot at Ofo? Just a little introduction.
Yeah. Well,
I was there last week. Our first webinar was with Bertrand Fleurot, CEO of Cityscoot, and Henri Moissinac, who potentially, if they're here, I salute them. But yeah, he was at OFO. So
Henri was actually at Uber, then OFO, and
yeah,
he's on the chat. I see him writing to us now, and and I'm expecting a tough question from him at the end of the webinar. But yeah, I worked quite a lot with Henri at OFO, and interestingly enough, like when I wanted to stay in Spain, they were launching DOT, and I was discussing with them when they were about to launch the project. But because I really wanted to stay living in Spain, I decided to join Scoot. That's the reason why I'm not at DOT right now.
Okay. Thanks for this great intro. A few words about Bird for people.
Yeah. So Bird is actually the first free-floating scooter company. We started in 2017 in the US. So the founder of Bird, Travis van der Zenden, was working at Uber, and he really he was thinking really hard about how to solve the last mile mobility issue. So I think that Uber is solving the 2, 3, up to 10 miles issue within city centers, but the last mile is still an issue. For instance, when you go from home to work, you take a subway, but really like finalizing and covering the last mile between the subway and your work and your destination was something that remained unsolved. That's how he got the idea of light electric vehicles, and were a great way to test it. So he basically went on Alibaba.com, bought a few scooters, put them on the streets in Los Angeles, and right away he saw that the adoption rate was just crazy. So of course the product became a lot more sophisticated, the technology a little more let's say advanced, and that's how the product started. Really quickly, it attracted the attention of users, of investors. In 2018, end of 2017, he started expanding worldwide, and Paris was actually the first city to be launched outside of the US. And the adoption rates when we first started in Paris were just crazy, with people just, enjoying the product a lot, and we could really see the potential of that. And ultimately, Paris became the second biggest market for us after Los Angeles.
Oh, well, we all know Bird, but it was just good to hear it from you. Thank you, Dries. So maybe I go to Samer for a nice introduction. Hi, Samer, how are you?
Very good. Thank you for inviting me, Omar.
Thanks for being here.
Sure. So a little bit about myself. So I joined AXA from investment banking in 2014. I was before both, I dabbled a bit with strategy consulting and investment banking before becoming in charge of Gulf and then Middle East and Africa in terms of inorganic growth for AXA and corporate development. So I was in charge of multiple countries looking for joint ventures or acquisitions in this region. Around 2016, with the arrival of a new CEO, the strategy of the company shifted towards more innovation, I would say, and more core focus on 8 large markets that we extract about 80% of our total global revenue, and the 8 high growth potential markets, China, Brazil, and so on and so forth. So with that shift, I was asked to move and manage as a CFO for all global innovation lines and services lines for the company. That today constitutes multiple companies that we consolidate under the portfolio with the various services that we offer our clients. The largest definitely being AXA Partners, which has under it the global services that we give for mobility, for health assistance, and for credit insurance, for example, across the world for all our global partners. The other part is all the global partnerships that you have, specifically on non-regional or non-country specific partnership that needs a little bit more management, one of which with Uber or other such platform players that necessarily need someone who can offer their services and their insurance across multiple geographies. The 2 other aspects of the business are a VC fund, which we have, which is called AXA Venture Partners Fund. It's today around $1 billion in terms of capacity overall, with about part of it has been deployed out of memory, maybe 300-400, and the rest is fresh capacity. In parallel to that, we have also our own incubator, in-house incubator, which is called Kamat. It has about 20 mix between very early stage to Series A, B, C companies in the portfolio, and our own, I would say, core innovation, which we run across various entities that we have globally. So whether it will be, the blockchain travel insurance that we launch, or other initiatives that we have across the group.
Well, okay, thanks so much for this introduction. And there's one thing interesting is why you both here together. First, because you're also a partner with Cosmo from AXA or Bird. We will talk about the partnership we have, but you're also obviously partnering together between AXA and Bird. So I really appreciate that you take the time to talk about that, to explain. We have the time, as you know, it's a webinar, so everyone can also ask their question, and we will make sure we will try to answer as fast as possible. But first of all, we know that we are a little in a crisis time. So first of all, how are you, both of you are doing? I'm sure you're at home. Are you home? Are you safe, Dries? Everything's okay on your side?
Everything's fine. I'm confined at home in Paris, and I'm really excited to start moving again in 2 weeks.
Yeah, Samer?
I am also confined at home in Madrid, and I'm looking forward to the end of the confinement, which will be a little bit longer than Dries.
So, okay, so I think we could start talking about the context and, this health crisis. There's a lot of consequences and implementing action. First, I want to ask, how's so now that you're fine, how's your business going? So maybe Samer, if you want to start. A lot of
course.
What have you been doing lately?
So our business, obviously, as many insurers globally, there is the AXA Next business and the AXA Global business. So on the AXA Next side, we've had obviously a surge in travel insurance claims to cover a lot of our clients which were traveling, or our clients which had the intention of travel, especially around the end of the, I would say, Feb. We started experiencing a surge in demand, which is good for our product, but also a surge in claims, which we have tried to keep even more capacity to provide proper service to our clients during this tough time. So all the call centers that we have are working extra time to be able to meet this additional demand for coverage in terms of health coverage for COVID or other related travel accidents. The other part of the business that we have, which, as you know, is since March, a lot of companies went into lockdown. So a big part of the mobility or the travel or the, I would say, the motor claims and the motor vehicles have really went down, both in terms of new policies and in terms of even claims. So our customers are no longer taking the usual transportation. They're also confined at home. We initially experienced it since January in our Chinese business. So there we've had the drop really in the beginning of the period. But then progressively we've experienced it across the world in various parts of our portfolio. So that's more or less where we stand today.
Yeah, I guess, people are confined at home, so they don't especially buy cars, they don't especially not allowed to travel. But on the other hand, like you said, there are less claims.
Exactly.
What about you, Dries? So same thing, have you been all locked down?
Yeah, so for us, I guess the crisis, I mean, obviously is hitting us quite hard, as you can imagine, because we're in most of the cities where we're operating, and when there's a strict lockdown, we decided to suspend our service, which means 100% loss of revenue, right? So people are not moving. We don't have scooters on the street in many of the cities, especially in France. We don't have scooters in Paris, Marseille, and Lyon, where we're operating before the crisis. Mm-hmm. So financially, it's a big hit. All of a sudden, we don't have revenues and cash incoming anymore, and it's been very tough for the industry. And I think that other players can testify and say that. Say the same. And it's been challenging times. Talking more specifically about Bird, I think where we were, let's say, lucky is that first we've managed to raise funds right before the crisis. We've had a big round of funding end of 2019, and a second one in early 2020 after the acquisition of one of our competitors, Cirque, a German player. So we had a big injection of cash from external investors that enables us to weather the storm in a more let's say calm way, or to be more optimistic about the future. And the second thing is we hear a lot about companies that are particularly struggling now because they've been betting on growth and exponential growth without really thinking about profitability, without thinking about unit economics. I think where Bird has done a good job is that we started thinking about how to make money on every ride very early on in the process. So we switched kind of our strategic model last year, where when we started with like high growth, exponential growth without necessarily being profitable at the local level. Now we are really focused on making money on every ride, and because the shift happened very early in the process, we are in a good position to last through the crisis and to last through 2020. Having said that, and maybe to reflect on what Samir was just saying, is we're not a big multinational. I mean, we're a big multinational company, but we're still VC backed. We're still a startup. We're still like very young, and we don't have huge cash reserves like AXA could have. So we depend a lot on making sure that our business is profitable on the short term, and our ability to raise funds through investors. So we're being very careful about the way we spend the money at the moment. We're rethinking our ops model, making operational model, making sure that every dollar we spend is worth it, and every dollar we spend fuels future profitability.
Okay, thank you, Samer. Do you take any specific action for I don't know, in favor of hospitals, your health employees or workers, as AXA is a insurance multinational group? Did you take any kind of did you try to be active during this crisis?
Absolutely. I mean, we have quite a few entities, and all of them have done several initiatives during this crisis to both help our employees and our clients and communities. So, for example, you might have heard of the 375 million fund committed to SME and society in general to support both our clients and the SME businesses. Also, we have refunded 2 months of premium for closed businesses. We have extended our cyber guarantees to home office during the crisis in France. We've given in many places such as Belgium and Egypt and other countries where we can, and Italy, free teleconsultation to all our customers through various partners or existing solutions that we have. We've launched even a COVID-19 product for SME in Italy to specifically target this, this disease for SMEs and to help SMEs get over the cost of covering for COVID. We have also launched in many of the countries that we have an online COVID symptom checker, so that even you're at home, you have doubt around whether you have COVID or not, you can quickly check if you have symptoms of COVID or not, to see if there is a need for you to go to physically and get yourself checked in. Some of the more, I would say, innovative products towards our clients have been in some new market entities such as Greece. We've done a pay-as-you-go motor product specifically during this time, where we know that some people are no longer using their cars, and therefore may not want to pay a year premium on when they don't know how long they will be confined, or until they use the product. So that's in general in terms of what we've launched. We have launched many others. So we've given grace period for premiums in Germany. We've done a grace period also in Hong Kong on premiums. So, we've done quite a lot across the world. It's quite a lot to list. But this is more in terms of our clients. In terms of our own employees, we asked all our employees that are not essential to stay at home very early on through the crisis. So maybe even before many countries announced the quarantine, we've went from typically we have 20% teleworking. Today, AXA is almost entirely teleworking, except for our essential employees, which we need them in the field. Yeah,
so it's a new way of working. We're going to talk about that. And just to finish on the employee side, I mean, especially in we were talking last week with Henri and Bertrand from Cityscoot and Dot, who wanted to try to be active. So if you have your employees staying at home, I think they're doing home working a lot. What the group, the numbers of employees you have in the group is huge, I guess, in AXA. And you, Idriss, regarding why did you try to analyze, maybe to think of being active, to try to do some kind of stuff for the hospital, or it was a bit too complicated?
So absolutely, I think when they announced the lockdowns successively in Europe, we took a market per market approach, and we looked at what were the confinement rules per every city. What operational model we had in place, where we were able to provide for our employees and for our users safety measures. So we decided to keep operating in cities where the confinement was more flexible, so soft confinement. So for instance, in Antwerp, in Belgium, in Tel Aviv, in Israel, in Stockholm, we were still operating through the crisis, and we were offering free rides for health workers. In cities where there was more stricter rules, we decided to suspend to make sure that we were providing, to ensure that we're not taking any risks for our employees nor for our users, and also to follow the government recommendations. So that's the case of our French markets, of Spain and Italy. However, we still, for instance, in Italy, we are offering or renting scooters for free for the Red Cross. So the Red Cross members can use our scooters to move around the city and make sure that they can provide for the citizens. We're exploring the same thing in Paris for the relaunch. So we're talking to hospitals in Paris, we're talking to health workers, we're talking to various public servants to provide them with scooters. And I think one of the biggest priority for us now is making sure that we have all the health and safety measures for relaunch. I think we'll talk more about it later, but it's actually crucial for us to ensure that if we do relaunch the service, and we plan to relaunch the service very soon, we have the most efficient safety measures in place.
Thank you for that. So there's some question arriving, and maybe we can just take this one, because as Alexandre Coquelin said to Idriss, is that still operating in Paris? It means that it's not only about legislation. Are you losing more money operating a small fleet versus stopping the services? So it's a good question regarding the fact that you're not operating. If you were operating, will you lose some money for a small fleet?
Great question. So when we took the decision to suspend the service, first we had very few information. There was a lot of uncertainties about what was happening, about the duration of the confinement. When we took the decision at the French level, we thought it was the best thing to do. The other part of the answer, and I think Alexandre has a question, right? Yeah, it is. So the operational model we have in France and especially in Paris is that we employ all of our drivers, all of the mechanics are under long-term contracts. So we have a workforce of over 120 people in France. So as stated by Alexandre, we will see after the confinement was announced, there was a drop of utilization, which is obvious because people were not moving around the city anymore. So people were expecting a big drop in utilization numbers for the scooters, and it is extremely hard to operate a small fleet with no to non-utilization, with very limited utilization, with a high workforce such hours, like over 100 employees. So for that reason, we decided that it was not first. We decided we really considered it was not safe enough to operate the fleet, and second, to come back to more practical and financial reasons, it was not efficient financially for us to operate a small fleet with such a workforce.
Yeah, I think it's one point that we need to discuss, because unfortunately, in terms of crisis for all companies and startup like us in France, we had the choice to put people on chômage partiel. We had to do some help from BPI and from the state. So for French company startup like ours, it was really appreciated to feel that the government was behind us. Unfortunately, for you guys at least in the US, there was a bit of a crisis. Can you tell us a few words about it? Because I think it's interesting to have your point of view. And like we said, life goes on, and we can understand that there's some cuts to be done. But can you tell us about what happened in the US regarding the?
Yeah, of course. So for those who don't know, there was like dismissals in the US. Unfortunately, we had to let go over 400 people about 3 weeks ago. So I think two things here. One is, as I explained, for us, the lockdown and the COVID crisis means 100% loss in revenue over an extended period of time. And there's a lot of uncertainty around like how long will it last? Like how long will the lockdown last? How the business will the business go back to normal after the end of the lockdown? So there's a lot of uncertainties. So we need to be extremely careful about how we manage our costs, how we manage our operations. We're here to stay. We want to build a business that will live beyond the crisis, that will live beyond other crises to come. So we need to make difficult decisions on the short term to make sure that we can outlast or we can last much longer. The other part of the answer is, and you're absolutely right, in France, in Germany, in Netherlands, we're very lucky because we benefit from state aids. So there were a lot of subsidies that have been put in place in Europe by the states. So for instance, in France, we put most of our employees on temporary unemployment, chômage partiel, which helps us weather the storm and make sure that we can keep all of the jobs. So we kept 100% of the jobs in France. We didn't have to make any difficult decision on that side, and it's greatly thanks to what the state has put in place. However, to come back to the US, there were no help, there were no subsidies, there were no aids. So when you lose 100% of your revenue and you have a big workforce, you have a big payroll, you need to make difficult decisions, and that's what we had to do.
Thank you for explaining that, because I think it's one of the first time that we have someone from Bern taking the courage, because it's simple. It was a tricky discussion, tricky topics. What about you, Samer? Do you have any bad decision or tough decision the group did for the employment?
The advantage of having a large balance sheet and operating, being at our size, is the fact that we have quite a bit of cash reserves built over tens of years. So
hopefully,
yes. So we were able to weather the storm without making any hard decisions, neither in terms of. I think that was announced by a global CEO that he will not, nobody will be let go specifically for COVID-19 related issues in AXA. And we haven't really taken tough decisions in terms of salaries globally. So this was rolled out during this uncertain period, and I think it helps us in terms of making sure that not only we are there for our customers, but also we're there for our employees, so that when this is over, we can make sure that they have the safety to manage the crisis and to go through the crisis with their families. So I think in many places, even in some of the investee companies that we have, which, as I said, we have many small subsidiaries operating like as startups, giving that kind of assurance was quite appreciated. Although, as mentioned by Idriss, it's very tough when you do that, and from a capital perspective, from a shareholder perspective, guaranteeing funding for companies which have taken a big hit in terms of their revenue.
Yeah, well, it's a good transition to talk about now, because we've been talking so far, and how did you handle the crisis, and now if we can speak about the day after the post-COVID-19. How are you guys preparing the end of the lockdown, and how you feel a bit about your initial roadmap? I'm sure beginning of 2020 was great for both of you guys. What has changed? And if you can tell us a little bit about what would be the first thing you will change in your initial roadmap. For you, Samer?
So a couple of weeks back, I think we've started to prepare the end of the lockdown as we operate in many countries. So in some countries, we're starting to have direction that the lockdown will be progressively unwound. So we've started to take plans and starting to put plans in place to make sure that the return to work is as safe as possible for our employees and our customers. So what we've done is we know that in the beginning, we're probably going to have at most 20% of our employees returning. And we've done some work in terms of splitting the employees into two redundant groups. Redundant meaning that for every function, there is at least 50% of 20% coming back one day and 50% of the other, 20% of the other 50 coming the other day. So there is both a 20% come and alternating between two groups so that we won't lose one function altogether within each country.
So 20% of your employees go back to the office, right? Is what you're saying?
20% go back to the office, alternating between two groups. And these two groups never see each other. So they only see each other through teleworking means, but they're not supposed to have any contact so that we can have full redundancy, not only in our technology platforms, but also in our employees who we rely on to run the business. So that's one. Two is also providing the 20% and progressively later more employees as we progressively come back to work, the necessary tools, the kits, whether it's face mask, gloves, the necessary tools for them to feel safe, and the separation. So we've taken some, I think, office decisions in terms of space, in terms of cubic centimeters per employee, and in terms of even hot desks and hot sharing, which today we don't think it will be safe for us to go back to the same thing. So we're going to be making also significant changes in our office proximity, how they sit with each other in the layout, in even when opening some food facilities or not. We're thinking of maybe doing some delivery rather than having canteens open, because we know that there could also be possibility for our suppliers not to be able to provide food. So we're making some significant plans to make sure that we come back progressively, we come back safely, and we take into consideration also people who may have some personal restriction around coming back, whether it's having kids at home that do not have school now, and which puts a lot of pressure on people, or some specific conditions. So it's going to be done very gradual, and it's going to be done, but there is a plan, but it's going to be done in a, I would say, as safely as possible for our employees.
So if I hear you, the back to normal is not for tomorrow.
It's going to take some time. Yes, exactly. Okay. So
how many employees do you have in the group?
I think we're over 160,000 altogether. So we're quite a lot of employees, and there's agents and so on and so forth.
So it's a good transition for Dries. The same question. I mean, if you have only 20% of the people who go back to work, how do you prepare the end of the lockdown? Well, let's talk about you and in France. There was a lot of topics in France. Your roadmap, the RFP of Paris, and also, as you can imagine, a lot of people are wondering how they will go back to work. A lot of people will potentially prefer to take a scooter, a bike, run, than to take the subway, the train. It will be a good topic. We're trying to reach also the RATP for one of the next webinar, potentially with Laureline from CHAMP. But on the other hand, I think people will still need to go back to work. People will go progressively. What's your roadmap? How have been evaluating since the lockdown, Dries?
Yeah, so there's a lot of subjects here. Just to go back on the first part of your question about how do we get ready for in terms of operations internally to make sure that we ensure safety for our workers. So what is a bit different from Samer is that unfortunately we cannot do work from home for most of our employees. So we need people to come to work, to charge the vehicles, to repair the vehicles, deploy the vehicles, to go around the city to make sure that the vehicles are deployed. So we have 3 big service centers in France. We have one in Paris, one in Lyon, and one in Marseille. So we're spending a lot of time this day rethinking the way we organize our operations in the service center. So in a service center, you do two things: you repair and you charge the vehicles. There's a lot of movement, as you can imagine, in a service center. There are a lot of people, so there are at any point of time. For instance, in the service center in Paris, there's at least 40 to 45 people, with like mechanics, with drivers, with people charging vehicles, and they're crossing each other a lot. And it's very hard to ensure social distancing in this kind of configurations. So we've spent a lot of time, and we're still spending a lot of time rethinking our operations, our flows within the service center. How can you make sure that there's always 1.5, 2 meters between every employee in a repair shop, for instance, because you don't have unlimited space. So you need to rethink how you organize the shifts. Do you have the same amount of people as before? I don't think so, because it's impossible to manage to ensure social distancing with that. So you need to rethink everything about your operations. I give you a simple example. Like there are many details, and the devil is in the details, right? So if you before, like, our employees would share tools in between shifts, or within the same shift they would share tools to repair scooters. Now we would need to assign tools to every employee, so they don't have to share tools between shifts or between people. So that's one important thing. And we have, like, the other part of the employees who can work from home. I think we'll still push from we have an office in Paris, but we'll make sure that whenever work can be done from home and we don't have to meet physically, we would work from home. So that's on how we prepare. Concerning, like, what's going to happen with the activity and back to work, with everyone going back to work after May 11. I think what was interesting is Henri said in the last webinar that he was expecting, like, an explosion of demand after the end of lockdown. I'm 100% aligned with this. I think there will be a progressive back to normality, and yes, there will be a transfer from public transport to individual transport, especially on peak times. I'm expecting a lot of people being reluctant to go back on the subway at 8 a.m. On Ligne 1 to go to La Défense, because you know that there will be so many people and it's very hard to maintain social distancing. So yes, on peak times, I think that there will be a higher demand. We can expect a higher utilization. However, I think the absolute number of trips, the absolute number of people who will move around the city will not explode all of a sudden, because people will still limit their trips within the city. There will be still work from home. All the non-essential businesses will remain closed until further notice. I'm thinking about restaurants, about bars, cafes, all those things. So I'm not expecting an explosion of demand right after the end of lockdown, but a progressive increase of demand. So what we'll do is that we'll monitor closely demand on a daily basis. So we have tools to predict usership, to predict demand, and allocate scooters accordingly. So the idea is to progressively launch and relaunch our fleet, not get back to full scale from May 11, but really taking it day by day and making sure that we match demand as much as possible. One key thing for us as a business is making sure that we don't oversupply the market. We don't want to flood Paris with scooters. We don't have, like, scooters that are sitting idle for hours, for days. That's, I mean, as a business and as a unit economics-based business, that's the worst that can happen for us, because the vehicles are depreciating. They're not being used. They're in danger, because if you have vehicles sitting for hours or days, they can be stolen or vandalized. So we want to avoid that at every cost. And the second thing is that you don't want to occupy public space with vehicles that are not being used, right? So that's also in terms of, let's say, acceptability of the service. So we'll progressively go back to normal. We have a few new features that will help absorbing the new users. So for instance, we're launching a warm-up, what we call a warm-up mode, a warm-up for new users who have never used scooters in the past. So you have to limit the speed of the scooter. So instead of going to, so Paris is 20 kilometers per hour, the rest of France, you can limit the speed until you master while the scooter, and then you can increase the speed progressively. And that's a key safety feature that we're launching as well.
On the app, right?
On the app, yes.
That's very interesting. And obviously, it's interesting to try to analyze what Samar was saying about the 20%. Obviously, I'm sure that the roadmap that you have initially for the month of May was bigger numbers of trips. What do you have an idea? You say it's going to go be progressively, but how about the fleets? How about would you put 20% of the initial fleets? Will you put more? You will adapt, I guess, from the demand. But do you have an idea of the 11th of May and 9 a.m.? Is it 11th of May actually? Are you going to be operating on the 11th of May?
So we're still working out on the exact timeline and let's say the ramp up of
for the 3 cities, huh?
Of the 3 cities, absolutely. So the one thing we're doing is that we monitoring closely the announcement of the government. On Tuesday, the Prime Minister will be giving a bit more details about the confinement plan, so that will give more visibility and clarity on what's going to happen. I'm not going to relaunch 100% of the fleet on May 11th at 9 a.m. That's for sure. That will be progressive. What's the starting number? I cannot share it now, and to be honest, I'm still working on that. But the idea is to make sure that we are a clear and reliable alternative for private car, primarily because we don't want people to go back to private cars after the end of the lockdown. And I think that's one of the fears of the city, having like an explosion of private car usage because people don't want to get on a train with so many people. And second, we want to be a good alternative for people who choose not to go on a train on peak hours and have other options. So we want to make sure that we match this demand, and we will monitor it closely. And it will
Regarding your partnership between AXA and Bird, compares to what you initially planned, because maybe you can talk a bit about that, because people doesn't know especially about it. So it's interesting to explain it. And is it going to change something in the next year? We will talk about the infrastructures. There's a lot of question about collaboration with public transport, with cities. We know that there are more and more, the cities are more open to put more bicycle lanes, and that will be profitable for a company like you. Can you resume very briefly your partnership?
Yeah, Samer, I can start if you want.
Please go ahead, and then I'll complement.
So we've been working with AXA for over a year now. So AXA is basically our insurer. So when we started on this business in France, just for reference, the trottinette électrique didn't exist in the Code de la Route. So it was very hard for any insurer to commit and take a risk on this business. Of course, it was a new business, a new venture. So you never know what's going to be the accidentology. You never know what are going to be the damages. You don't know. It's very hard to take a leap and go on a new business like this. So what AXA did is that they quickly saw the potential of these new mobilities. So whether it's shared scooters, but also shared bikes, shared mopeds, and worked very early on like providing the operators with a flexible and adapted offer. And we worked very closely with AXA last summer on building the right offer for this kind of service. So we've been insured by them ever since. So we basically, the way the insurance works is that we pay for what we use. So whenever there is a ride, we're covered. The third party is covered. So the user is covered on individual damage. As well as the third party with unlimited cap, and that only works when the vehicle is in ride. So that enables us to like really not pay for a monthly payment like you would do for a car. Let's say you buy a car, you only use it once a week, and you pay 150 euros per month of insurance. It doesn't really make sense. The insurance is a big chunk of your expenses. Now we only pay for what we use, and I think it's a great example of like insurance understanding the new mobility modes and adapting to this offer.
Thank you, Driss, for saying that. It's always nice to hear a partner saying that you've done something good. So it's great that you started the introduction. No, but indeed, I would say 3 to 4 years back, we started seeing the potential of new mobility services and micromobility being the new wave. And we thought that it would be a great complement to the more rigid infrastructures in cities and cars, and it's definitely a more nimble way to move around, and definitely a more flexible way to reroute the traffic and in peak times. And it's much more flexible. And we're not even talking about cars, we're talking about trottinettes or whether it's scooters. It completely changes also the central planning and the old way of what cities used to plan their infrastructure once every 10 years. So this gives a lot of flexibility, and it's a great complement to public infrastructure or even private owned infrastructure, which is cars today. Now, a few years back, we've looked at our products and saw that they were completely not suited for this type of new mobility infrastructure that is coming. And we were very much convinced, and we're more convinced today, that the future will have to embed this new mobility in every city infrastructure for it to be, I would say, more open and livable for with an increasing population. So especially for denser cities such as Paris, New York, and others, it's crucial for them to include this new mobility infrastructure in the way that new cities plan their infrastructure. And for us, we've decided to shift our products to become a micro-term, micro-duration products, micro-premium products also, that scale up and down with our partners. So we appreciate the fact that a lot of the new mobility players are not long-term players, and therefore they don't have a lot of space for massive overhead in their setup. And therefore it's very important for us to shift our products from being a fixed-term, rigid product, ensuring an asset, rather to become ensuring a ride or ensuring a term, which is very different thinking. And we've pushed our actuaries to rethink the products and restructure them to be suitable for a partner such as Bird that we're very happy to have working with us.
And maybe as we're talking about your partnerships in micromobility, but you did others. I mean, other scooter company, but I think you also partner with Uber. Can you tell us a bit about your strategy in the micromobility partnership?
So we've started early on partnering with Uber, and I believe we've started initially in doing a personal accident cover in one of the emerging countries. I believe it was Egypt, where we structured a PA cover for riders. And
for the cars, right? Sorry.
For the people
Uber
riding
car.
in the cars. Uber car, but there is all, and that was the entry point. I would say the first way we started partnering with Uber, and it was a very limited partnership. From that, we were able to scale today to over 14 or 15 countries where we have an existing partnership only on that specific cover. And then we started, I would say, it's starting with that specific relationship and increasing our covers to cover, for example, drivers, or most recently to go to elective covers for drivers in the UK, which means that for a driver who has an accident in the UK, he has the possibility of paying per mile driven and getting a cover for out of work coverage. So if his car is in the garage for 2 weeks, for example, or a week being fixed, he can get an equivalent or a cash amount that could compensate him for being out of work for that duration. So we started with, compulsory, we would call tier 1 products that we adapted to the new mobility infrastructure, and then we progressively increased. Initially, it was complicated to convince, our entities as a group to ensure micro, policies, because it's a bit of a hassle to set up a product approval process and go through the regulatory and internal risk processes to get approval for a small premium policy. However, with the ability to look a little bit, longer term, with the ability to consider that all these policies fall under one partner or one contract, we were able to quickly scale up the way of thinking of our entities. And we have quite a few successful relationships that we were able to scale from a pure Uber, the usual car mobility, to Uber Eats, Jump, and all the other parts of the infrastructure of Uber. So this is an example of a successful partnership, another successful partnership that we were able to increase the collaboration.
So micromobility partnership will grow for you, right? In the next few months, few years.
It might not be short term or medium term,
you
but
won't have any more car customer.
We in our initial plan, to be perfectly clear, so Axa's long-term plan was for us to have 4 to 5 years where we were seeing a big shift in terms of car usage and car ownership. So even before this crisis started, we were planning to have a big shift, and therefore we were planning to move our motor product, and we were one of the largest motor coverage company in the world in terms of motor coverage. So we were gonna move our premiums from covering cars into a different way which accompanies our client, whether it's new mobility products, whether it's fleet products for customers such as Uber or Bird, so in any case there was this shift. I think in the short to medium term, I agree with Dries that in the short term I don't see an explosion in terms of coming back, because it's going to be a gradual comeback. But in 18 months, 12 months, I am convinced that this new mobility product will be I would say even more important for city planners, and a standard that will be adopted in a lot more cities. And I call New York or most European cities, which should be less and less friendly to cars and more open to these mobility products.
It's interesting you're talking about expansion, because I was talking about the roadmap initially. Dries, for you, so even if you are handling France, you have 3 cities. Obviously, Paris is one of the big challenge, because when we organized the Cosmo Safety Tour last month, we knew that Paris was like the #1 city of micromobility in terms of ride, in terms of revenue. So it's kind of very important. But do you know a bit more about your initial roadmap? Were you about to open other cities in France? As Samer is saying that in 12 months' time it would become a standard. I'm sure we all share the same vision. Can you tell us a bit more about your next move, about your roadmap, readjusted roadmap, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you were right when you were saying that cities will need to rethink, and Samer just stated it correctly right now, is that the cities need to rethink transportation infrastructure. They need to make sure that, there's not an overflow of cars, of private cars. Just for reference, I think that a bike lane can make transit five times as much as more what the car lane, let's call it the car lane, on peak hours. So you can have 5 times more people transiting through bikes on peak times within the city, which is huge. So the impact on congestion can be just quite significant. And what we've seen is that a lot of cities have initiated like a super ambitious infrastructure for cycle lanes and bike lanes before the crisis, and the crisis is kind of accelerating this. So there's been a few announcements in various cities in the world. Paris has announced or working on the Plan Vélo. Hearing about the RERV, the RER Vélo, which for me it's a huge project. It's still in the works, still in discussion, not confirmed, but for us as micromobility operators, it will be like amazing news. Whatever is good for bikes is good for scooters, basically.
And like you say, I just interrupt, but people in Paris, I don't know, I remember, I think it's Ari was giving the stat, but people in their car, they drive by themselves, most of the people using their own car are by themselves. So if you extend the bicycle lane for scooters, yeah, like you said, it would be easy 4 to 5 times more people on the road at the same time.
Absolutely.
Greener.
In a way, and what we've seen is that, I mean, one of the only good news from this lockdown is that we've seen the level of emissions of PM 2.5, which is a particle film in the air, has just dropped by 60% in Paris. So the sky is cleaner, the air is fresher. So this shows that there's a potential to switch, and I think we have an opportunity to rethink our consumption, our transportation mode after the crisis. So for us, it means a lot of things. It means that we want to continue expanding our service, go and reach more cities in France. As we're operating in Paris, Lyon, Marseille right before the crisis, and we aim at going back to all of those cities. In Marseille, we were lucky to win the RFP last year. So we're operating a fleet of 2,000 scooters there, and we can't wait to be back because we think that there's a huge potential in this city, and the good days or the nice days are coming back. So there will be a need and an ask for this kind of service. Lyon is also a city we're targeting to go back to very, very soon. Lyon is also preparing their RFP. We're actually responding to the RFP these days, and we have to submit it in May. And you said it rightly right before. In Paris, there was an RFP, so we submitted together with 16 or 15 other operators let's say a submission, and I think the city is reviewing the application as we speak, and looking forward to get the results and keep operating the service here in Paris.
Thank you. By the way, Anne-Sophie Tran is asking, are you going to change your fleet with new models at the end of the lockdown?
Yeah, so we're actually introducing a new vehicle in France. It's called the B2, which is basically the most and the last generation of scooters. It's a more sustainable scooter. It's more rigid, more robust, more adapted to sharing. It has a lifespan of 36 months, which makes it the more sustainable scooter in the industry. The battery autonomy is the largest in the market as well, which means less charging, which means more productive time on the street. So it's a great advancement for us in terms of unit economics, as you can imagine. And it's also a safer vehicle with better lighting. It's a platform which is a bit wider. It's more let's just say it's built for sharing a lot more than the previous vehicles. So we're introducing that vehicle in Lyon as soon as we relaunch. In France, it will be our first city.
Okay.
And short after, we'll be launching it in Paris as well.
It's a nice coupe. So nos amis lyonnais will be able to try the first. Is it already live in the US, or it's something that you will try?
Already live in the US, and it's live in most of the cities in the US. It will be live in Europe, in Lyon, which would be one of the first cities in Europe to get it.
Okay. There were a few questions related to safety, as you know, and this is also why we are all partnered together. We know that we did a study with YouGov last month when we introduced it for Cosmos Safety Tour, and we noticed that for the 76% of French people noticed that the people should wear a helmet, mandatory when they ride a scooter. Also, they're like 50% of the people thinks that the cities are not really adjusted for the safety of each riders. What's your actions of preventions, both of you, to make sure that people will be more safe? So would you do some action? There's someone who was asking what kind of action you will do in the next few weeks after the lockdown. And on the other hand, Samer, for you, what kind of thing you want to, what kind of action would you, AXA wants to put to make sure they can reduce the number of accidents, because almost 45% of accidents in scooter include head injuries. So as people will, like you said, they will be locked down for 2 months. I'm sure they will rush. I mean, the ones who will they want to go out, they will rush on riding their scooter. But what is your message to make sure, guys, okay, let's go out, but be safe? What would be your next action? Obviously, there's our partnership, but what else would you try to put?
I can start, Samer, if you want, and you can take it from there.
Sure.
So safety is key and central for us, and you're right. There's a big question around helmet. So the helmet are not mandatory by law, so you can ride a scooter without a helmet. However, it's only advisable to wear a helmet. So we need to find ways to incentivize our users to put on helmets. The problem that you can imagine when you're a scooter user and you don't carry around a helmet all the time. So you're not ready to wear your helmet when you get on a scooter. Sometimes getting on a scooter can be a spontaneous action, and you're not always prepared with helmets. So we need to find ways to tackle that. So we're doing many things. One is that we are actually launched a safety marketplace, which is basically a marketplace on the app. We're going to launch it in France, hopefully when we're back on the road, which enables you to buy safety products through partners. And one of the very first product we're introducing is actually one of Cosmo connected products, so the connected helmet. So we've been working closely with you, Romain, on getting this product on the marketplace. And
yeah, we were very happy to. I don't know if you've seen. I'm trying to put it on the. Okay, I don't know if you think on my picture. I shared the screen with your bird watcher. Maybe you can also explain it. It's the bird watcher, but so
yeah. So bird watchers are bird employees that are basically on the street working on the fleet. So they do three things. They work with parking. So whenever a scooter is misparked, they check it and replace it. They do rebalancing. So rebalancing is basically making sure that the scooters are at the right place at the right time. They do on the ground repairs. So whenever there's a damage on a scooter and it can be fixed on the street, we send them to fix it on the street. So those are people who are passionate about the product. They're doing an amazing job. They're solving so many issues on a daily basis, and we wanted to make sure that they were safe on scooters because they basically ride all day. We partner with Cosmo to equip them with scooters that are, as you can see, connected and have like rear lights, so they can be seen on the road. They can whenever they want to turn right or turn left, they can let the people behind that they're turning. So there's a lot of things you can solve with the product. And I personally think it's a really, really cool product. I use it myself on a daily basis, whether I'm on my bike or my scooter. So I'm really enjoying it. And we want to make it accessible to all of our users through the safety marketplace. So you'll be able to buy it through that platform. We have other great innovations. We have like inflatable jackets for users. We have products that will be available. So that's one way to kind of promote those products. One other way, and to solve what I was just mentioning, is because it's a spontaneous action to take a scooter. How can you make sure that the user has access to a scooter at all times? So we're testing with a few solutions. One solution we're piloting, and we started to pilot right before the lockdown, is an inflatable scooter helmet. Sorry,
helmet, yeah,
on a scooter. So you basically have a helmet that you just push a button on the app, automatically inflates. You use it, and then you put it back into the let's say the receptacle of the scooter. Of course, it has to be very clean. So there's like a plastic film on every helmet that you can remove once you're done with it to make sure that you meet like health standards. That's one way of like pushing people towards wearing more helmets. And obviously we do helmet distribution very often. So we give free helmets. We do like sensibilization actions, teaching people how to ride a scooter, like trying to sensitivize people on how to ride. There's many things we want to do, and we want to accelerate this when we get back to the streets.
This is excellent, and thank you for that. Indeed, there are the active and passive safety measures that we are trying to promote. So one is the use of helmets, also the use of proper clothing, or the use of, I would say, inflatable helmets or passive means that if someone gets into a accident, then they have protection, proper protection. It's, as you know, that one of the major reasons of major incidents is a head injury when you're in a scooter, because you're more exposed than when you're driving in a car. So it exposes you to the elements. So having the right way, wearing the right clothes, wearing the right helmet is the right way to go. And also the product that Bird is promoting, which is which is your product for Cosmo, which is whether you turn left or right and whether you stop, is a big, I would say, a big part of trying to make sure that all road users are aware of where you're going, because the other part is behavior, which is the other part of proper road use and behavior of road users. So whether it's alerting the cars or other potential hazards where you intend to go or how you intend to move, or effectively promoting safety for the users of scooters or the users of trottinettes, to make sure that they are using them properly, they're parking them properly, they're taking the right steps to make sure that they don't use them in a way that exposes themselves to or other road users to hazards is all of the parts I think that we're trying to promote, and it is in line also with our mission, which is protection for our clients, and it extends to protection of all clients, including all road users.
I think you're right, and something that has been confirmed is the POC, that the proof of concept of this scooter company the last 2 years. We saw in Paris how it was, in France how it was complicated. The launch has been quite tough, and now I think we were talking about it also last week. People get along between cyclists and e-scooters and car driver. Regarding the crisis and potentially the world of tomorrow, what is your vision of what's going to happen next? In terms of what would be the economics, you think, impact of this crisis on your company? And well, let's figure out first this question, and then we'll also answer. There's a lot of questions. So, what do you think the world of tomorrow will be the first impact on your company?
So I can start if you want, Dries.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Perfect.
So first, I think the crisis have done to AXA and other companies what we've been trying to do for many years unsuccessfully. In a way, it has had some positive impact. We are convinced today more than ever that the best way to reach our clients is going to be digital in the future. So a lot of our products are going to be either in terms of sold digitally or even handling the claims in a more automated manner. So I think across the company, we have accelerated any measures, and I think this would be also the focus of AXA Next, which is the services and innovation component of AXA, is to make sure that a lot of our entities accelerate on any digital sales of policies. So automated policies that are facilitates underwriting, facilitates the way that our clients' understanding of the policy happens. So instead of going through reams of paper, trying to sign or having physical interaction, we're going to be equipping a lot of our agents and a lot of our customers with digital ways of interacting with the company, buying the policy in a more seamless manner and remote manner without physically having to come to our offices, and trying to educate a lot of our claims digitally. So not having to do physical education, having to send a claims adjuster physically, which is, I would say, the classical way of doing it. So these initiatives will be highly accelerated across the company in many of the entities that we have. In parallel, I think the world of tomorrow is going to accelerate some trends that we were starting to see. The one being the move from car ownership to car usage, which will be, or mobility means usage, which will mean that people were going to be using a mixed means of transportation rather than owning one specific car, because in a way, owning one car is very limiting. So in one way you have a car, but you need to park it, which is expensive in big cities, but also some days you need a car for you only, so go to work and come back. Another day you might have it for 4 people because you're going with your family on a trip. And some days you might want to go to the mountains, other you just want to go somewhere congested, which means that you need something much smaller. Not to mention parking around the cities as well, not only to keep it, but also to go from point A to point B. So it seems to me very logical to own a fixed assets in the future when you have means, especially in congested cities, to have a mixed use assets where you can get a combination of bikes, trottinettes, physical, infrastructure, and potentially car rental companies, on-demand companies, to meet all your different needs in different days. But to do that efficiently, I think there needs to be a big infrastructure planning by a lot of cities, and I do believe that post-COVID, this will start being highly, I would say, accelerated in cities as well. The other part that a lot of that many people have not thought of, and now it's become more come to up in terms of priorities, is the need for safe transportation, whether it's physical road safety or whether it's usage safety in terms of epidemics and social distancing. So there needs to be a way that we can move in a safe manner, and being congested in metros is not probably the safest manner for people to be transported from point A to point B. So a lot of personal choices will also change. The use of assets that we have in terms of cities might also change. So today we have a certain plan where we're planning maybe 80% physical work. Tomorrow we might plan maybe for 50 or 40% work from home, which means that the needs for movement and mobility of our people will be drastically changed. So the purpose of their moving and the needs for moving might be less for work and more for leisure, but the use of remote work and the use of micro trips might be higher, because then you can just go around your house and get what you need in terms of practical needs, rather than having to travel 20 or 15 kilometers to work. So we are preparing. A lot of changes will happen. It will be gradual. But
you will need to adapt. Yeah, you will need to adapt to that kind of new way, new life, new way of riding, transport. Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting, Samer, what you were saying. And what about you, Driss? How do you see the world of tomorrow for you, for Bird, for your user? Is it greener?
I think it's greener. I think that well, the change has actually started before the COVID crisis. I think let's say that climate change has been around for much longer than the coronavirus, and I think that most of states have been aware of like the challenges we're facing. I think, however, that this crisis will kind of accelerate the process. I strongly believe in the electrification of transportation. So I think we'll see. We've already noticing a switch, which was extremely slow. I mean, the share of trips done on an electric vehicle, specifically on on electric car, is less than. I think that in France is less than 3%. It's much higher in China. In China, it's close to 50%, because they've been switching, and they've been incentivized to switch to electric vehicles much earlier. Obviously, most of the electric vehicles are being manufactured there, so that helps a lot. But I think that this crisis will kind of accelerate the switch to electric vehicles, even though I think that one thing that will kind of slow this switch is we've seen that the barrel of crude oil was negative last week, so the oil the price of the oil at the pump is much lower, even though in France it's not so obvious, because there's not such a strong correlation between the retail price of oil and the crude oil price, because it's only about 25% of the retail price is made of crude oil. So it's more obvious in the US. In the US, crude oil drops by 50%, retail price drops by 50%. Not so obvious in France. So I think that we'll have this switch to more electric vehicles, and also to more light electric vehicles. We were talking right before about the bike lanes and about the infrastructure, the investment in infrastructure for bikes. I think that this is going to accelerate. There's a lot of big and ambitious plans in Paris, in France in general, to cover all of Paris by 2024. 100% of the streets of Paris will be covered, will have some kind of bike lane. I think that's quite interesting. And what Samir said right before is that there less and less people will want to buy their own car. Less and less people will want to be confined in their car for hours every day, and they will switch to individual light electric vehicles, whether it's mopeds, scooters, or bikes. So I think that means three things for us as a company and as a mobility operator. One, we need to make our service more accessible to everyone.
Okay.
Price. It needs to be a serious alternative, and accessible, affordable alternative to public transport. I believe that there's still a lot of work to be done on that side. We remain an expensive product, and if you are a commuter, it is very hard financially to commute on a daily basis on a scooter 2-3 times a day. It adds up quite fast. The second aspect I think we need to keep working on is reliability of the service. We need to make sure that we have enough vehicles to match the demand, so you don't have to look for a vehicle for let's say more than 5 minutes. You need to have something and as fast as possible, so you know that whenever you want to go somewhere, well, the scooters are the go-to way of transport. And the last point is we need to be safe. So of course we need to have good vehicles. We need to have just like we said before, a way for users to access helmets easily. But now we need to add a pillar, which is like health safety. So we need to ensure that our vehicles are being sanitized many times a day. We need to make sure that whenever you take a scooter, you know that you're not running any risk to get the virus, for instance. So those things are.
That was one of the question of I don't know who added, but exactly what kind of action you can guarantee. We talked about that last week, but people could be very worried to go on a scooter and get their virus from the scooter. That would be bad publicity, but obviously it would be tough because, like Ari was saying, except if you're really coughing on the scooter. But in few words, you're gonna make sure that the scooter will be clean as much as possible.
Yeah, we're gonna make sure that, so we're enforcing like new processes to make sure that the vehicle gets clean. Of course, we cannot clean every vehicle after every trips. I mean that would just be possible. It's very hard to do. However, we can increase the frequency of cleaning. So whenever a vehicle gets back into the service center, get repairs, charged, and systematically goes through like a bath process where it gets sanitized. And then on the streets, we talked about bird watchers right before. So we have about 50 people on the streets of Paris. They will all be equipped with sanitizers, and they will regularly go ahead and go around the scooters and make sure that they clean them on a regular basis.
Are you going to add some sanitary message on the app on the 11th of May or not? I'm just thinking out loud. It's my question. Just wondering when you're going to rent, when you rent the scooter, you have different steps. Like 5 steps, I think, just before jumping on the scooter. Are you going to add something specific regarding the COVID-19?
Yeah, we're definitely going to do some messaging to our users, some simple messaging. I mean, wash your hand before and after the usage of a scooter, use gloves whenever you can, and make sure you respect all the social distancing measures. So those things are we're gonna do. I think that by the time we relaunch, most of the people will be educated on that matters, but we'll keep on enforcing the messages, definitely.
Are you going to encourage people also to use your scooters? I think it was Camille who was asking if you have a monthly membership, or are you going to I don't know, promote? We talk about it, about how we could do some specific business offer, but regarding your customer, do you really want to encourage them to use your like you said, it was expensive to use it each ride, because for people who doesn't know, you have to pay €1 or $1 to rent the bike, and then after you pay like 15 cents or something like that per minute, or 20, whatever. But it still could be expensive. So do you have a solution for what you were saying 2 minutes ago about promoting maybe some specific membership program?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're looking into, I'm a strongly believer of subscription. So you pay a monthly fee, just like for your Pass Navigo or your public transportation pass, and you get unlimited rides. That's something which is being studied at the moment, and I'm hoping to implement that very soon. I personally believe that this will be a game changer, and we'll be acquiring a lot of users through that, and we'll remove kind of the accessibility barrier through that. The other thing which is being developed and discussed at the moment is, that many companies subsidize your transportation fees. So, for instance, they can subsidize up to 50% of your Pass Navigo. So we're studying together with other operators a way to include as well within this Pass Mobilité the scooters, and have companies subsidize part of the rides for the user. So there are many ways to incentivize our users to get on scooters more often, and one way to remove the friction is to have kind of a unlimited pass that you pay on a monthly basis, and you just use it as many times as you want.
You did something like that, I think, with I don't know if it's in the US or you just do the possibility to get your own scooter instead of renting it, like a free floating. My question is simple. We're talking also with Henri and Bertrand last week. Are you exploring B2B opportunities like renting scooter? I don't know if you're doing it. Some people are doing it. I think it was Voi in Sweden. I know that you will also launch a new vehicles, at least in the US. And I'm going to ask the same question to Samer afterwards. What kind of different strategy in terms of business you will do from original plan? Are you doing a more B2B, also seeking B2B partnership with Bird?
Yeah, so B2B is a huge growth lever. I think that there is a big potential to work with companies on implementing such a service. So, for instance, in Paris, we have actually with Dot, we are partnering with Amazon, who has a big headquarter in the north of Paris, and we're supplying them on a daily basis. We're granting a supply of scooters on the Amazon campus, and they get like a discounted ride. All of the employees get discounted rides that enable them to go back to Paris or to go to the closest subway station. And it's been working pretty well. We've seen a lot of interest from the employees, and we want to expand to other businesses. So we're discussing with other big companies. We're actually discussing with AXA as well on implementing such a solution for other businesses. So I think that the B2B business, for two reasons. One, because you get access to a big resource of users all of a sudden. If you target a big company like AXA, Amazon, or L'Oréal, you immediately have access to thousands and thousands of potential users and users that are within your targets, because those are commuters that go to the subway, that use public transport, and those are the people you want to target, right? So that's one. And second is if you manage to subsidize or to get those rides subsidized by those big companies, it becomes extremely interesting for the employees and the users to use your service. So I also believe a lot in this growth, and when we get back to the streets, I want to make sure that we acquire more.
And it's international customer that can be duplicated after in other towns. So it's exactly for your company.
I think this is a great idea, Dries. And in fact, it's to complement on that, it is part of our return to office plan. So in the past, I think we were encouraging a lot more of our employees to use public transport to reduce the environmental impact of using their own cars, or use scooters or mopeds or other ways of transportation. I think in the return to office, at least in the beginning, we're going to be discouraging some of our employees on using public transport, at least to make sure that they have a safe means of getting to work. So the ones that are living, that you rely heavily on public transport, it would be a great solution for us if they can use alternative means. And it definitely could present a big surge in terms of your usage base, because we have quite a bit of employees in many locations. And if I personally try to use this means to go to work. One of the keyest part is availability of scooters in the morning, and availability around specific location. So we have bicycles, but it doesn't fit my need because my commute is a little bit longer. But having the assets in the right place, having them in the right concentrations, and doing the plan with B2B customers, I think it would be a great growth avenue, because it's definitely something that we are thinking about very seriously and taking into consideration. So you should definitely talk to all AXA entities about that, because it's part of our next plan.
Okay, and from what you both say, it's really interesting, and we believe that more and more people will use it for personal or professional use. Do you feel that cities, we talk about the bike lanes, but will be more and more open to work with you directly? Someone was asking a very interesting question on the chat. Say bike sharing, dockless motorbikes, free flow scooters are a great alternative to public transportation. I wonder if public authorities could decide to take a further stake into micromobility in light of the COVID crisis. For instance, would they implement their own expand public services such as Veli for other transportation modes? What do you feel about that?
Okay, I'll start, and Samir, please feel free to jump in if you want to say something. So by experience, we've seen cities launching those kind of initiatives, and a few examples in Paris being Vélib, Autolib, which were quite interesting. Unfortunately, what we've seen is in many cases, it is very hard to implement a service which is quite, super innovative, that needs to be super agile when you're a big organization, and especially a public organization. So there's no, I'm not saying that public organization cannot innovate. I'm just saying that it's harder to innovate in a flexible, agile way when you're a local collectivité locale, like a city council. So I think where cities can help foster this kind of industries is working hand in hand with private operators and integrate their solutions within a larger transportation scheme. So for instance, we talk a lot about MaaS and about integrated multimodality options. And I think that cities can play a role in aggregating and putting together different players. So for instance, in Marseille, we're talking to the Métropole of Marseille, which is implementing kind of a MaaS solution, putting together many pieces. So that will go from public transportation, so buses and subway, but also like private operators of bike sharing, of scooter sharing, and putting everyone together on the and making sure that they're offering an integrated system to all their users. So I don't think that cities per se should go ahead and launch those kind of services and build infrastructure, buy the vehicles, develop the technology. I think that there are private operators. I'm not saying that can do it better, but until now we've seen doing them better. I'm just comparing Vélib to Jump, for instance. I think that the service offered by Jump is of a high quality as of now. So I think that the city should be more position themselves as an aggregator and a facilitator more than let's say the innovator itself.
Jump maybe saw the history of the first launch of the Vélib and the Mobike and Nofo, and arrive maybe with a better product. I mean, not from Vélib, but I mean from the other competitor. Samer, do you want to add something?
Yes, so I fully agree with Reese. I think it's coming from a large organization ourselves. It putting a innovative idea into a large company process it makes it very complicated to get it launched, because normally you put different standards, and the standards are meant to manage risk. They are not meant to manage testing or learning, which is a typical way that you launch and improve a product. So for a typical example is city planning, which in the classic ages used to be once every 10 years, and not accompanying new ways of transportation or new concentrations of people and changes in the city itself. So you do one central planning one time every 10 years, and then after 10 years you look at it and you realize many things have changed, and maybe 5 years later all your assumptions are not correct anymore, but you've committed to a huge infrastructure project, which is exactly where I think this new mobility companies come in and can really play a big role in terms of improving both the flow and the ease of transport of movement of people. So definitely I don't think that cities should take lead, but could be an aggregator. One of the main pain point of using multi ways of transportation is payment. So if there will be a unified payment, a unified identity where you can have a card, and instead of having a Metro card, you can have a card and pay throughout the journey, and having integrated, for example, it's a perfect example of having an integrated seamless process. So whether you're using one mode or the other, it's all linked to one account. That for me would be one major point of pain that you can elevate for users. The other one is faster planning. So faster planning by cities and integrating, I know I've said that before, but integrating the micro mobilities in the infrastructure relieves a lot of cost, unnecessary cost for cities. And I think it's very important for cities to shorten their planning cycle and take into consideration these new mobility modes to make a more agile way of planning the cities, and not committing large infrastructure projects in the beginning without without reviewing it on a very, very regular basis based on also transportation trends. The third one is availability and utilization of data. Today, a lot of the data in terms of mobility is disintegrated into many different providers. I think Google is trying, or other Google Maps or other trying to have an integrated mobility, but it doesn't exist today. But also the ability of cities to take an integrated view of all the transportation of people in terms of to inform their own planning process would be a great way forward in terms of planning better. Last but not least, regulation. So you need a friendly regulation, because if you think that this is essential for a city going forward, there is the current regulation of France to support, whether it's Bird or others in this time of need. It's very important, because I think France appreciates, and I think it understands the importance of having this innovation and these innovative companies operating in the ecosystem post-COVID, because this is a once in many, many year event, maybe 100 or 50 year event, and it may come in 50 years, and it would be a shame to lose a lot of the innovation that we have in France and other cities in the world. So I think this will also quite help.
Thank you. It's very interesting, and I think the people in the cities and government will appreciate what you just said. Just a few questions, because we are already did an hour and a half, which is very cool, and there's some more few questions. There's one interesting, how you guys work together with third party to collect data. So I know that Bird is working in France. I think is with Plume Labs, if I'm correct. You tell me if I'm wrong, but how do you develop these kinds of new model to collect data? Obviously, there's some synergy with Cosmo, how we could identify some accident zone, because Cosmo can identify the accident and notify the nearest rescue, make sure that they can come. How do you feel working with third parties to make sure that your services?
Yeah, so I think there's many ways to collect data, and there's many types of data we can collect. You just mentioned the partnership we had with Plume Lab. Just quickly to explain what it is. So we're basically working with Plume Lab, which is a French startup who developed a device which monitors the level of quality of the air. So they have like 2 generations of devices, and that gives you an idea of how clean the air is within your city. So there are ways to monitor that today, which are basically like fixed captors in the city, but by essence and by definition, you want to cover the whole city, and you want to make sure that you have a clear view of the level of quality of every single street, every single corner in the city, and this small device enables you to do it. So what we've done with them is that we've equipped our bird watchers with the device, and we're able to draw a map of pollution of Paris. So we knew for every single street in Paris, what was the level of contamination, what was the level of pollution, and how it evolves over time. And what's quite interesting is that we've done it pre-COVID, and then there were new studies that were released recently that showed kind of a huge drop of emissions by 60% in Paris. And we're planning to expand this program after the end of the lockdown to equip more bird watchers and even users with this device to get more reliable data. So that's an example of data collection, which I think is super interesting, super useful, can be leveraged by the cities. For instance, if you have a certain area of the city which is highly polluted, well, you can close the streets for circulation, for instance, on any specific day. And that's the data we're willing to share, and we're sharing already with the city of Paris. So that's just one example. Another example of data that we're collecting is that, well, by essence, we know where people go, where start their ride and end their ride. Unfortunately, there's a very limited number of things we can collect from our users. We don't know like the gender, we don't know the names and everything, but we know where they start their ride, when they end their ride. So we know what are the commuting flows and processes and patterns within a city. Macro way, exactly. And we can, and Samer was just talking about city planning and how city planning is done once every 10 years. Well, now it's a more agile and flexible way to approach your city planning, because you know well, we can tell you on a daily basis or an hourly basis how do the people move within your city, and how to adjust, for instance, your bike lanes infrastructure, how to make sure that you have enough subway stations in a particular area of the city. So that's ways for us to use the data and to share it as much as we can with our third-party partners.
So for us, we try to collect the data that we need from our third-party providers, obviously, or partners. Obviously, we have, I mean, in Europe and other places, we apply the GDPR to protect the privacy and who touches the data of our clients, because we do have specific data, identifiable data for our clients, and therefore it's a bit sensitive. But more anonymized data that could help in terms of mobility is collected when there is, I would say, for example, we have with few OEMs schemes where we collect the mobility data of cars, for example, and then there is a feedback loop where it feeds into pay-as-you-go policies or a premium reduction, where if you have the right behaviors in terms of driving, which is already live with a couple of OEM in Paris today or in France, you get a discount for good behavior. So we try to reward good driving behavior, for example, of our clients. However, I would say that we collected quite a lot of data, but maybe a traditional insurance is not the best at monetizing these data. So our model has been more around monetizing, the policies, the risk. So putting capital at risk rather than data. So I would say operators such as Bird, for example, are probably more agile and more equipped than AXA to monetize the data. But it is something that we have been, I would say, put a lot of effort over the last 3 years. And I think now we've come a long way in terms of looking at the data and trying that is shared with us, with our partners, and finding better way to give value back to our clients from the data that we collect, whether it's through premium reduction or through other means where we give, I would say, part of the value that we get from our customers back to them.
Okay, great, guys. Well, I mean, this session has been amazing. I will end up with 2 little questions for you, Samer. So from what I hear, you're going to switch your investment strategy only in mobility, and you're going to forget about medtech and insurtech and other projects. Or no, more seriously, what is a bit of your, from AXA Next, what's the investment strategy do you think that has been changed since this crisis, or what can you say about that?
I think in the short term, the biggest change the crisis has brought to us is 2 things. I would say, in the very, very short term, I think the company is putting a little bit on pause our investments and to reevaluate our existing portfolio to see if we have enough investments in the strategies where we see the world is going. So, for example, if we see the world, which we discussed, is moving from having more individual-owned cars to fleets or to mass transportation, then are we well positioned or invested to capitalize on that? Not only in terms of our product, but also in terms of the right technologies and solution to be able to adapt the clients can accompany our customers in the future. So that is today ongoing. So I would say we are a little bit probably on hold temporary until we see when does the crisis end. And we are, as I discussed, we are in a strategic review, which started before the crisis, but now has been more, I would say, stressed on, becoming more important in terms of our 2023 strategy, to look at how would the world look like in 3 years, and where are our assets and our investment well positioned to be where we need to be.
Thank you. It's really clear. We all know that all the VCs potentially are a bit stressed, which is quite normal. Maybe we will know a bit more in the next few weeks. What about you, Dries? How can you reassure that Bird will be there, will be the leader or one of the main actors? You talk about scooters, you talk about B2B, you talk also about new kind of electric vehicles. Are you confident in the growth of of your company. Obviously, we hope that we will be able to ride scooters very, very soon. But what is your vision to, let's say, to give a positive ending to this session? You will also get a positive final word this summer, to be fair.
Yes, so I think there's both external and internal factors. Externally, we talked a lot about it today. There's a switch from private car to individual transportation, light electric vehicles, sorry. And there is also an investment of cities in infrastructure to push for people to go more towards bikes, scooters. So I think those things show that we're, in the sense of history, we're working towards like the progress, and I think we're in the right direction. And internally as a company, why I think we'll let's say outlive this crisis, and then we're here on the very long term and long run, and we'll be able to reinvent ourselves. Is one, we're investing a lot of our resources in R&D. So we're working a lot on improving vehicles, making sure that we have the best vehicle out there that can outlast all the other vehicles, and that can be the most reliable one. The second thing is we're focused and laser focused on making sure that every ride that we do is a profitable ride, so that we're not losing money on every ride. So that means making hard choices on expansions, on making sure that you only go to markets where you think and you know for a fact that you'll be making money. So that's a hard decision, because sometimes you're inclined to grow a lot, but and a lot of our competitors do that. But we really took the choice of focusing on let's say the markets where we know that will be profitable and making money on the long term, so that we can be self-sufficient and we can auto finance our growth. So I think those things will help us stay here for a long time and on the longer term. And I think that the crisis we're living, we'll take some positive out of the crisis we're living at the moment, because it forces us to rethink the way we operate.
Well, thank you. It looks very interesting and promising, and we hope you will be I'm sure you have the good strategy. It's a good strategy. We talk about it with Henri and Bertrand. Each has their own strategy, but the more important is to be profitable
exactly
as possible.
And we have great partners, right? Cosmo and AXA.
Yes.
True. What about you, Samer? A final word to be on a positive note for our watchers and your customer.
So I think on a positive note, I mean, this is a crisis. It's quite dramatic, but I do believe that we will pass it. And maybe the positive part that we take from this, despite the tragedy, the human tragedy that's happening, is that a lot of the companies that will remain at the end will be stronger for it and more well prepared for future, maybe more difficult pandemics. So in a way, it strengthens the existing ecosystem, and it makes sure that we have more sustainable business models in the longer term.
Yeah, obviously, I didn't want to mention a bad, negative future in case of second wave, because it's not what we want to hear, and we're not. I mean, expert, and let's see first how things will go on. And thank you, both of you. As you can see, my kids are yelling, and I think for you, it's going to be the same. It's going to be dinner time. So, Dries and Samer, thank you very, very much for taking almost 2 hours of your time. It's our second webinar. It was the first in English. To do many more. We hope to see each other again very soon to do these safety events, to promote safety all for our riders. And well, I wish you all the best. Stay at home, and we'll be live again next week for our third webinar. Thanks again. We have some questions that you can potentially answer after that, but thank you for your time, and stay safe.
Thank you, Romain. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, Samer, for your
Samer, it was great. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, guys.